I do have a question. First of all, thank you. It was a very detailed report. It was a lot of. My question is, what would be the difference? And I don't know if you have the numbers. You mentioned putting up a new facility on River Road or repairing the two facilities we have on. Or repairing a brand new large facility, not the. Not the cold storage. A brand new facility. I know it was like $14 million or something at one time. But what's
quick numbers, and I think we'll be back at budget season with more on this, but in some quick round numbers, if we had looked at putting a facility out at River Road to the tune of about $11 to $12 million. We can do cold storage out there only, depending on what we do, anywhere from about 1.7 to about 3.5, maybe a little more. One of the things to keep in mind with regard to this cold storage out there is we currently have a Quonset hut that stores the SOC equipment. Very valuable equipment. A TV truck that costs you $250,000. A sewer jet truck that goes for about $300,000. That unfortunately likes to be warm, especially on nights like tonight, because if we have to use it, it's filled with water. It can't freeze. So we have a bunch of equipment out there that's very expensive, and I think we really, that Quonset hut's 70 plus years old. We did some more Band-Aids to it this summer. It's still standing. Someday the hard wind's going to come by, and we're going to be picking that thing up. So I think we have to look at whatever we do out there has to take into account that the Quonset hut, a portion of that, a portion of any new facility has to be heated, at least to 50 degrees, to keep the equipment, the TV truck, et cetera, warm to some degree for use. If we're looking at the two existing facilities right now, we gave Mark budget numbers of approximately $1 million over the next 2 years to fix each of those facilities up. There's enough stuff out there in each case, be it paving, be it building, being it a three-sided structure, a roof on some areas, looking at expanding. If we're not to move the salt dome, at least expanding the salt dome greater than the 1,700 tons we currently keep in it. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that we can look at and do both at John Street and also at Harrison. Harrison's got some issues. The concrete pad out in front of it needs to be replaced. It's about 12 inches thick and reinforced. It's what we use in which to put the jacks on it when we're doing work on certain vehicles outside, because they don't fit inside the garage height-wise. Inside there are ventilation issues. We also need to look for a better home for for the repair of the parking meters and the housings. Currently, those get painted this time of year, usually in an unventilated room over at the Susan Patterson Center. So not only is it unventilated, but you're in the Susan Patterson Center, and you get the picture. So there's lots of little things that we have to look at, that if we're not going to build a big facility, that we need to make improvements. So versus that 11.3, maybe you're looking at $5 million worth of improvements, $5-6 million, something in that area, in order to give yourself facilities to continue to function out of and to take care of some of the problems that we currently are facing.
I can make one statement. One of the thoughts behind this is, one of the things that was very clear through this process is staff just wanted to know, make a decision. If it's no, that's fine. Just give us some suitable working environment. And I think the way we should look at this, it's very clear that we haven't been able to establish a good location for the facility at this time. And what kind of the plans are is, if we can make some improvements that maybe give us 10, 15 years, maybe we revisit that time, but we make those improvements with a useful life that will push kind of this decision. At some point we may have to come back and look at this, but we should at least make those improvements now so that it can work in a reasonable, more efficient way.
Mr. Miller.
I don't want to accuse you of sugarcoating the report that you gave us tonight, but I want to go back to the consultant's report and read something from the consultant's report that was just behind the report you gave tonight. I'm going to read the section on weaknesses. 1, the facilities that house the equipment and employees of the department are totally inefficient, are totally insufficient, inadequate, and inefficient. This issue was the number one weakness identified by the staff. Most vehicles and equipment are not stored overnight in buildings, which causes maintenance and efficiency issues. Some equipment is being stored in sheds, which are in poor condition. Many times, employees must go to multiple sites to acquire the equipment and vehicles to complete their tasks. Management and rank-and-file employees are working out of trailers, the quality of which is poor. Vehicle mechanics must work in substandard conditions and travel to multiple sites to get the equipment before beginning work. The result is a fractured approach to the provision of public services. The staff believes that a consolidated location would provide a significant increase in efficiency and so forth. We've been dealing with this for as long as I've been an elected official, and that's 14 years, and I'm sure that it goes back earlier than that. I think that we've got to stop kicking the can down the road and saying that someday we're going to find the optimum site for our Public Works Department. Because one thing that engineers learn very early is that the best is very often the enemy of the good enough. And I think that we're at a point where we ought to work on getting the good enough and getting a facility built that addresses the weaknesses that the consultant pointed out. And just stop the process of leaving it to somebody else to solve the problem 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Thank you, Barry. I think and you may recall from one of the discussions with Dave when he was here, one of the things he said to us is that we are our own worst enemy because we're functioning at a very high level out of very substandard working conditions. And he said, you guys are your own worst enemy by being able to do all that you do. And he has observed, he's been, as Mark knows from having met with him, he's looked at a lot of facilities in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and said, you do a lot with not much. From the standpoint of our vehicle maintenance and how we operate and come in and meet every day and get in and out of our facilities. I mean, we work out of a double wide out on John Street. There's 30-some people that report there on some given days, and not to get too graphic, but only 2-3 people at a time can go into the bathroom area. So there's a lot of juggling to get ourselves in and out at the beginning and the end of days.
Another issue that has come up from time to time at Council and at the Public Works Committee is, let me back up to what I was addressing a moment ago and come back to this. One of the other recommendations that the consultant made was that the 3 elected officials that are on the Public Works Committee go out and visit other public works sites. And 3 of us did. And I think it was a real eye-opener to look at the sites in Robbinsville, Lawrence, and Hopewell Township in terms of what facilities they have and compare them to what we work out of here in Princeton. And I think that Patrick, Jenny, and I made that trip. And I think we all came away convinced that we are really working out of not just substandard facilities, we're working out of absolutely lousy facilities. And we need to do something about it. The other issue I wanted to ask you about is that we've often talked about whether or not we're keeping up with road repair and keeping up with sewer maintenance in terms of how much we do per year, and whether we're just creating more deferred maintenance by not staying on some sort of maintenance plan that addresses the fact that we've got 110 miles of road and roughly the same number of miles of sewers in town. And when we do a road, we might get 20 years out of it. And if you divide that into 100, we ought to be doing 5 miles per year. We're not doing 5 miles per year. And that says to me that there's going to be a day of reckoning at some point. And the same thing about sewers. Once again, we're deferring maintenance, and we're going to pay the price for it at some future date.
Yes, Bernie, in each case, there's approximately about 125 miles worth of sewer and 125 miles worth of road in Princeton. We are not doing enough on a yearly cycle to stay ahead. We're surviving right now. But yes, I do believe, I agree with you, that down the road, we eventually will fall back behind again. We had sort of started to catch up when consolidation hit for a variety of reasons, some budget issues, and just what we were able to tackle collectively between the Sewer Operating Committee, Public Works, and engineering. We have slipped. I think we've talked some numbers that in the past we were when there was the old borough and the old township, the total was probably close to about $7 million being spent. It's probably closer now to about $4.5 to $5 million that's being spent on a yearly basis. So it has slipped behind. There is not as much Public Works, the borough did not do it, but the old township Public Works did do some paving every year, every couple of years, did do some paving work or helped with an outside company to do some. We've done some more of that in the last year or two, where we've had Top Line has had a contract that did pick up some of the paving, but there is some juggling that needs to be done. Deanne and I, along with our staffs, have been meeting regularly the last couple months to put together a better work plan collectively among both departments and to look at how we better can utilize. But then it goes back in some cases to some of the staff and the Public Works staff, with leaves and with these little requests and everything else. You may have to say no to some of that in order to block out 3 or 4 weeks in the summer to go do some paving work and just say, no, this is what we're doing during this time period. So to answer your question, yes, I agree with you. As per our discussions, we have slipped in what we used to do, but I can tell you collectively that between engineering and Public Works, we are meeting consistently to work towards developing a plan of attack for dealing with our infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simon, do you have a question?
Just to kind of explain the problem a little bit that we've just been discussing. The centralized Public Works facility, if we build it, the minimum estimate that we've seen is $10 to $12 million, and the last capital plan we've had from Mark adds to that substantially, and a sort of off-the-cuff number from our consultant was much higher even than that. It was close to double. In fact, I think it was more than double. But it was an off-the-cuff number, not a studied number. But he said, look, for a town your size, $25 million would not be an unreasonable amount to spend. Right? So that's back to the number that both towns looked at before consolidation and said, we can't do that. So the problem is that these costs are real, they're high, and they really have to be planned carefully for multiple years out in order to make them work at all. And on top of that, we're seeing some, I guess I would call them unanticipated consequences of consolidation. We've had to adjust service for leaf and brush pickup because the township and the borough had such different leaf and brush pickups, and it's a little bit less than what the borough realized, even though the official policy was whatever it was. But the township, which is much larger, it's been up-serviced, and the net result is an increase in manpower needs. And one of the other notes in the report, much farther down than the facilities, which is the big item. But one of the other notes is that the staffing cuts have had an impact, and the staffing cuts were relatively modest overall compared to the overall staffing cuts for consolidation. But even so, along with the up-service, especially the old township area, it hasn't quite played out the way we anticipated under the plan for consolidation. That's the most diplomatic way of saying it. It's a challenge, and there's a cost attached to it. So
we can have cuts as much as we have.
There were a small number of cuts, if I remember right. It wasn't large in Public Works, not compared to police, right? But
I also remember, too, I think during the recession, the road budgets were reduced, and I think the sense was that would be temporary, but then that came right before consolidation. So when the consolidation committee was looking at what the spend was, I think we benchmarked everything to an amount of road repairs that was at a reduced level. I know that the township decided not to do some, to put off a couple $1 million of what they would normally do, and I think that the borough did also.
There were 3 years of clear reduced spending, 2012, 13, and 14.
Yeah.
What I had under the impression was that it would fully recovered by 2015, but in our discussions this year and the strategic review, that's not really true. We're not back to the full spending level on roads and sewers that were the average prior to 2010, 2011,
That is correct.
And that is what Councilman Miller was referring to when he said there's a long-term deficit that's building up that
Right.
We need to get ahead of. So that was actually news. I thought we had this discussion and had fully recovered, but there was some miscommunication somewhere along the way, and there's additional spending that's needed in order to get there.
Yet both groups, engineering and sewer, both have kicked back up a little bit after being down, but has not kicked all the way back up. That is correct.
Ms. Butler, did you have a comment?
I have a number of comments, actually. I do think when we look at the backup that's taking place, we also have to take into account that the university is doing Alexander, which wouldn't fall into our budget exactly, but it's road and sewer work that's being done, this stuff on University Place, is it not? So I think the numbers maybe don't, the actuality is not as bad as the numbers might have you believe, even though I think we're not back to the spending, the pre-consolidation spending, and as Patrick said, we did have 3 bad years.
The sewer work on Alexander, we actually did that.
That's in our budget?
We did that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The 340 that you spend on, 340,000 that you spend on the repair, 360, is that salaries too? Does that include the salaries of the people, or is that just time and material?
That's just parts, equipment, materials that we use, that we need for everything. That includes police, recreation, public works, all the municipal vehicles, engineering.
Okay, but that's not that's not
It's
salaries.
not salaries, it's just all parts and materials.
Okay. And I guess I just want to follow up too on Councilman Miller's point about kicking the can down the road. One of the reasons that we've had to kick the can down the road is that to undertake these building projects, it would likely put us in a financial position that we've decided that we don't want to be in terms of the debt. And until some of that debt falls off in 2017 or 18, we would be, I mean, at this point, if we started tomorrow, we couldn't build it by 18 anyway, most likely at the rate these things go. But, we'd be exceeding our debt limit most likely. So we're going to have to, well, I don't want to say that. Then,
Well,
Lance said we should.
I have his credit card.
But I'm not even sure with increasing taxes, we still wouldn't exceed the debt limit. So we've got a problem in that we've created these rules for ourselves and we're bumped up right against them. So it's not as if we're just kicking the can down the road because we have no interest in doing it. On the weaknesses, I mean, you identified that we spent a lot of time this fall talking about the emerald ash borer, and yet the leaf and brush collection, there's the recommendation, I guess, that maybe we do less brush pickup or limb pickup, but I don't see how we're going to do that realistically with the problem that's staring us in the face with the emerald ash borer. I mean, not only will it decimate the ash trees, but, it's likely to also, as limbs fall or trees fall or whatever, there'll be debris that goes well beyond the emerald ash borer unless we tell people in our tree city that we pride ourselves on that we're not going to support that.
I understand what you're saying. I don't totally disagree with you. One of our biggest problems is it's a continuous task. Schedules are not followed. We don't enforce because we don't have anybody to run around and issue tickets. But if we tell you that we're going to collect brush on the third week of April, that doesn't mean to put it out on the third week of March, and then it sits there. And the argument is that whether it's a small lot, a large lot, or something in between, person will say, well, I'm not storing it on my lot, I'm putting it out.
Yeah.
And you know, Joe, as well as I do, some of your neighbors don't even put it on their own lot. They go find somebody else's
Oh,
lot to put it
no.
on.
Tell me about that. That's a subject for
and,
another day.
That's a problem also. And fortunately, a couple of those people whose lot stuff gets piled on, be it churches, temples, institutions, they don't make a complaint. But one of your neighbor could... we could spend all day writing tickets there with the amount of stuff that gets put on
The
the center.
entire street could get a
That
ticket.
gets thrown across the street on their property instead of people keeping it on theirs. And that happens year-round. And we have the same thing on the university. And the university usually doesn't complain. They just pick it up with their stuff and take it. But they get lots of their neighbors who, I think they must go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and drag it across the street and throw it there because the next morning there's stuff all up and down the streets.
Well, we've never really been able to break through in that education. I don't know why that is, in trying to get compliance. And so,
I think that one of the problems is enforcement, and as Mark knows, because we went and spoke with the court a year or so ago, the level of documentation to go after somebody and actually find them, we would need to hire a person to do it full time. And it needs to be somebody that has the enforcement, and it's either the police or the health department, neither of which have time to go around writing people tickets and taking pictures and documenting material that's put out of schedule.
all right, but backing up to another issue, on Access Princeton and sort of also the issues you described where you run out and pick up glass in the street, whose decision is it to prioritize? You could say no. We've talked about it in the Rec Commission when people call up and maybe make a complaint about the parks, a bench is broken or whatever it is. If it's on the schedule to be done later, we don't do it. We just say it'll get done next March. That's when that, stop doing it.
The majority of it is the decisions are made by the staff, being Dan, Chris, Henry, Brian. Those guys make the decisions. What they attempt to do in those cases is if we are going in that direction on a given day to do something, we will add it so that it gets picked up and gets done. If we're not, Dan, and you all know Dan, and you all know Dan's look on his face, Dan has gotten to be very good at saying no.
Good.
And Dan has skin as thick as his table. So, he's gotten, Patrick's laughing, he sees him sitting there at our meetings, but Dan has gotten to be very good at saying no. And then people get upset and unhappy, and they keep calling, and Dan keeps saying no, and eventually when we get to going in that area, we'll deal with
Right,
it.
it's
But
tremendously
we are
inefficient.
trying to get better at using the word no.
Right. It's tremendously inefficient to drop everything you're doing and run after every single complaint. That was always my fear with responding to something that pops up on Access Princeton. That can't be a priority, and that can't be how we judge the performance of the department.
We have tried to work very hard with them so that they realize that that is not an emergency response.
Right. Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
The other thing is, I wish that, I don't think Rec had any input in this visioning, or they weren't consulted, even though, like they do, you worked together on the parks, and I don't think that there was
The major
conversation
thing with them right now is the grass contract and the mowing. You know, and we've
Well,
worked
also, they picked
that.
up the old borough DPW stuff. They picked up the park, the inspection of the playground equipment, they picked up the trash collection in the parks, did they not?
They are doing the trash because they go by it. So we have adjusted, yes, you are correct. They're doing some of the trash. They do the maintenance now, or they inspect all the equipment. Some of it they do the maintenance on, some of it, depending on what it is, they'll call and have us come out there and take care of it. Tree stuff still is obviously, the majority of it falls to us to deal with. So, you know, they work. You know, did we get into deep with them on this? No. But on a daily basis, do staffs talk to each other? Yes.
Right. I know you talked to...
And Dan's also good at saying no to them
Right.
on occasion.
On the garage, does it make sense to hold off on the solar if you find out that there's some sort of structural problem and we've moved forward? Have we already, the solar panels up and I don't know it yet? Does it make sense to wait until after you get this assessment?
We don't envision, and even when the couple consultants came to look at it to do their proposal, we don't envision that there's anything that's major from that standpoint. And we just have some areas where, for whatever reason, rain hits some of the concrete. We have some concrete that needs to be looked at. But structural steel-wise, no, we don't expect that there's any
Okay, so there's no reason not to go ahead
There's
with
no
the
reason
solar
to
panels.
panic about that.
And the one other thing I want to say is, I'm sorry you didn't put the CBD on this, because it looks awful. And it's so disappointing. It's ironic that we, got some other downtown award, but they're all looking at Palmer Square. They're not looking at the stuff for which we have responsibility. I mean, this morning, there's a television in front of McLaughlin's. This weekend, the streets are full of people shopping. There's garbage all over. It looks terrible on Nassau Street. And people are putting out their individual garbage right next to the trash cans, big white bags. It's so disappointing, and I wonder, we got the strike force to go work on invasive species. I don't know why. I feel like we need a strike force for the CBD, but...
Well, I can tell you that I agree with you that there must have been a lot of trash out there, because normally the guys make it to Monument Hall sometime between 8:30 and 8:40, in which to pick up the trash at Monument Hall. And today they were about 2 hours late getting there. So there must have been one heck of a lot of trash on Nassau Street and Witherspoon and down that area, because they were close to 2 hours late getting to us. And I understand they had to take the trash and go dump once. That's a small truck. So that's 6 cubic yards. So that gives you an idea of how much you were right. And unfortunately, I don't know what to tell you about it, but you are correct. A lot of people did some cleaning over the weekend, because there was a lot of stuff on the street this morning.
So just coming back to the big ticket item, the facilities, the date in the report is December for recommendations. So how far along are you really, and are we going to, at the Public Works Committee meeting next Monday, are we going to be talking about options, or are you not far enough to be able to do that?
I think we're going to be giving stuff to Mark in the next week or so, that, and then where it goes into the budget cycle. I guess I should readdress that it's what our work, our task, is getting our stuff done. But, I think it's mostly to get information to administration for the capital budget review in the new year.
Ms. Carla, did you have?
Well, it seems like it would be a good idea for the Public Works Committee to look at it, doesn't it?
We meet on Monday.
Right.
Oh, so you're saying we are going to? Okay. I thought you were just saying that we
I'll
weren't.
talk to you Monday when we meet.
And I think a lot of the items on here are already on the council goals and priorities, but maybe you can just take another look through this and just see if there's anything that should be put on there. I know I think we've had a discussion already on the big item here, so I'm not going to comment on that, but I had a few smaller things. For the Nassau Streetscape project, one thing we've spoken to engineering about was if there were inexpensive recommendations there or less expensive things that we might want to act on this year, whether or not we get that grant. And I think it'd be helpful for Public Works staff to take a look at that report in terms of what you all think would be the biggest bang for the buck in terms of improvements. I think that we would want to prioritize that potentially based on your feedback. So that was number one. Number two, for some of the goals, you list continuous, and I know that means that it's important. You guys are always working on it, but I think it's also helpful to sort of think about if it's a goal, what would be the measure of success, and to try to just drill down a little deeper for those. I was just at a conference over the weekend where we were talking about the stress between these two goals that every municipality pretty much has, between being responsive and being efficient. And I think probably Public Works is where those come to a head most frequently. And I don't know if this is something for the Public Works Committee to help brainstorm about, but maybe there's something where we have that list of landscapers that we have on the website, and maybe there's, if through Access Princeton we can be tracking what are the calls that are coming in that are those things that are taking away from efficiency, and is there a way to tell people we're not going to be at your street to address this for another 2 weeks. In the meantime, here's a resource list you can look to get it addressed immediately. And, depending on what those items are, that's maybe something that can be worked on. And I think that's it. I had another note here, but now I can't remember what my point was, so. Are there any final comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can give you one final comment because it's that time of year. And just in case you're wondering, about half of our fleet is already outfitted with its snow equipment. We've checked all of our plows. This way I don't have to tell Mark tomorrow. I don't have to report to him this week about it. But we are, should that white stuff and some ice start falling, I can tell you that our equipment is prepared and ready to go.
Do we have enough salt?
Currently, our dome is filled with 1,700 tons. Can't get any more in there right now.
Okay, thank you.
And you have more on order.
I'm sorry?
You have more on order.
As long as Sandy pays the bill.
Okay. All right, thanks, Paul. All right, so our next work